The vast dark expanse of space stretched endlessly as the Volter fleet descended toward Earth, their arrival unseen by the majority of the planet's inhabitants. The first sign of their presence was the appearance of their massive ships appearing like dark shadows, blotting out the stars. As they entered Earth's orbit, Commander Zorvac stood at the helm of his flagship, the Voltaurus, looking out at the blue and green world below with a sense of cold calculation. Earth was just another world to conquer in the Empire's ever-expanding domain. Its inhabitants were weak, primitive, even with their weapons systems outdated and unsophisticated compared to the superior technology of the Voltor Empire. Zorvac's species had conquered countless worlds with ease, and Earth was no different in his mind. He gave orders to initiate the invasion with confidence, believing that the humans would surrender without putting up much of a fight. He knew they would cower in fear at the sight of the advanced fleet descending from the stars. He had no intention of negotiating. He didn't care for diplomacy or peace settlements. To him, the humans were little more than an obstacle in the way of expansion and resources. Once Earth was subdued, he would add it to the growing collection of conquered planets in the Empire's vast dominion. The first wave of ships dropped down from the fleet and began to circle the planet, blocking out any attempts to contact outer space or to send distress signals to other worlds. Earth's defense systems couldn't reach them, not with the energy shields in place. Humans were ill-prepared for this kind of attack, and they would be paralyzed by the initial shock alone. But as Zorvac watched the blue planet below, something sparked in his mind, a fleeting thought. He quickly dismissed the humans could never be a challenge for the might of the Voltor Empire, but even so, a small part of him wondered what kind of resistance they might try to muster before surrendering. Despite his dismissive nature, he couldn't completely ignore the possibility that the humans might surprise him with some form of defiance, even if it was short-lived. Back on Earth, panic spread like wildfire as the news networks around the world began to report sightings of the enormous alien ships. Fear gripped the hearts of humanity. Governments scrambled to make sense of the situation, and military leaders quickly realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. They were not ready for this. A global invasion was beyond their worst fears. The shock and confusion overwhelmed the population. People ran through the streets calling for safety, while others tried to contact loved ones, desperately trying to comprehend what was happening. In the midst of this chaos, human leaders came together in an emergency summit. At the heart of the world's efforts was General Marcus Stone, a seasoned military strategist, known for his ability to lead in the most desperate of circumstances. He had seen warfare on a scale few could imagine, but never had he encountered an enemy like this. He stood in a room full of world leaders and military officials, watching the image of the alien fleet on the screen with cold determination. He knew the humans had one thing no alien empire could anticipate: they had the ability to adapt, the will to survive. They might be outclassed in technology, but they would fight to the last. He made a vow to himself and to the rest of humanity that Earth would not fall without a fight, that the invaders would soon learn just how resilient the human spirit could be. As the Volter fleet loomed overhead, Earth's response was frantic but disorganized. The first wave of alien attacks began in full force. Within hours of their arrival, lightning-fast assault ships swept through the skies, targeting cities and military bases. With surgical precision, Earth's air forces scrambled, but they were no match for the advanced Voltor technology. The aliens unleashed a wave of energy blasts from their ships, tearing through the atmosphere and incinerating anything in their path. The devastation was immediate and overwhelming. In a matter of hours, large sections of the globe lay in ruins. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, and Earth's military forces found themselves powerless to defend against the onslaught. The Voltor's weaponry was far beyond anything the humans had developed. Their ships moved with incredible speed and firepower, outclassing Earth's best efforts at retaliation. The people of Earth watched in horror as their major cities fell to the invaders. Their most advanced weapons were ineffective, and their once proud military felt helpless against the alien assault. Back at the human command centers, chaos reigned. Governments scrambled to form alliances and put out fires in every direction, while most of the world's nations were at each other's throats over resources and territory. The threat from the Voltor forced them to momentarily set aside their differences, But their unity came too late. The alien invaders had already landed and began their ground assault. Across the globe, the Vaulter began their occupation. Zorvak's orders were clear: take control of Earth's major population centers and eliminate any resistance. They deployed ground forces of terrifying strength, massive walkers and advanced drones that tore through human defenses with ease. They didn't even bother negotiating with the Earthlings. Their message was one of complete and utter dominance. They would crush all defiance. Humanity's response was a whirlwind of desperation as the initial waves of attack turned into brutal occupation. Earth's military forces made their first attempt to mount a resistance. They gathered whatever forces they could, scrambling to defend the remaining strongholds while their leaders tried to coordinate some semblance of a counteroffensive. General Marcus Stone stood at the heart of the human command center, scanning reports coming in from every front. His face was grim, but resolute. His first instinct was to fight. But he knew the truth. They couldn't win a conventional war against the Vaulter fleet. Earth simply didn't have the technology or the numbers. Instead, Stone devised a plan that played to humanity's greatest strength, its adaptability and ingenuity. He would rally the human resistance not through brute force, but by striking where the Vaulter would least expect it. He believed that a guerrilla approach could level the playing field in ways the invaders couldn't anticipate. The first step was simple: disruption. Stone ordered every available asset to sabotage the alien supply lines. Wherever possible, they would need to cripple the Vaulter's infrastructure, slow their advance, and force them to stretch their resources thin. While the aliens were focused on crushing organized military resistance, humans could work in the shadows to weaken them from within. However, Zorvak remained confident that humanity was no threat. His forces, he believed, would easily handle whatever scattered resistance the humans could muster. He underestimated the human resolve, believing that once their cities were captured and their military decimated, the fight would be over. That assumption would prove to be his greatest mistake. As Stone and his forces prepared for the coming battles, he knew one thing: humanity wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. As the days passed, the situation grew increasingly dire for humanity. Yet, despite the overwhelming alien presence, there was a spark of resistance that refused to die. Earth's military forces, though shattered, began to regroup in small pockets across the globe. They formed clandestine cells dedicated to undermining the Vaulter from within. These groups weren't equipped with the advanced technology of the invaders, but they were armed with a raw determination and the knowledge that they could not surrender, not yet. General Stone knew that humanity's survival depended on more than just bravery. It depended on their ability to adapt quickly and fight smart. As Earth's governments scrambled to coordinate with what little remained of their military might, Stone set into motion a series of bold and unconventional strategies that would make use of every advantage the humans had, even if those advantages were small and seemingly insignificant. His first move was to capitalize on the one thing the Vaulter did not understand about Earth: the humans' ability to improvise using what little technological knowledge they had gathered from the Vaulter's initial attack. Stone directed scientists, engineers, and military tacticians to reverse engineer any pieces of alien technology they had captured. Their efforts were focused on finding weaknesses in the Vaulter's seemingly perfect systems and developing countermeasures that would level the playing field. In parallel, Earth's hackers and cybersecurity experts began to infiltrate the Vaulter's communication channels. They slowly learned the complexities of their encryption protocols and began planting viruses that would cause systemic failures across the alien network. It was a slow process, but the damage began to add up. As the Vaulter command structure faltered, the humans saw an opportunity, a window to strike back. Meanwhile, small human resistance groups executed daring hit-and-run tactics against the Vaulter's supply depots and patrols. They sabotaged alien equipment, destroyed food and ammunition stores, and set up ambushes where they could trap isolated alien units. With each success, the human forces grew more daring and confident. They had no choice but to take risks, to gamble on their ability to outwit the aliens in ways the Vaulter couldn't predict. Zorvak, still confident in his superiority, watched from his flagship as his forces began to experience strange setbacks. He dismissed the idea that humans were behind these failures at first. He thought it was just the result of simple mechanical failures or poor planning. But as more reports came in of alien systems failing without warning, energy shields short-circuiting, communication channels going down, and weapon systems malfunctioning, he began to wonder if there was something more to it. He had no idea that a quiet but relentless force was chipping away at his empire from the shadows. Earth's military, now bolstered by civilian resistance networks, began to target the Vaulter's energy production facilities. Critical hubs that powered the alien fleet. Zorvek's fleet was vast, but it was dependent on these facilities to maintain its momentum. The humans knew that if they could cripple the supply chain and slow the alien advance, they might have a chance to mount a full-scale resistance. What the Vaulter didn't realize was that humanity's biggest asset wasn't their technology or their firepower. It was their ability to think outside the box, to innovate when faced with impossible odds. They were a species that could take nothing and turn it into something. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and most importantly, they refused to be conquered. General Stone's plan was simple yet effective: disrupt, weaken, and frustrate the Vaulter at every turn. When Zorvek's forces began to experience breakdowns on multiple fronts, the Vaulter commander knew something was wrong, but still believed that victory was inevitable. His arrogance led him to underestimate the resilience of the humans, a mistake he would soon regret. The battle for Earth was just beginning, and humanity was starting to show the aliens exactly what they were capable of. The first major clash between humanity and the Vaulter didn't take place on the battlefield. It took place in the shadows, in the quiet corridors of the aliens' technological strongholds, as Zorvek's forces tightened their grip on Earth. Humanity's resistance continued to grow bolder. Moving with surprising speed and agility, they began to target the Vaulter's critical infrastructure, not through direct assaults, but by exploiting every weakness they had discovered in an unexpected turn of events. Human ingenuity began to make a real impact on the invasion. General Stone's strategy was working. The Vaulter, once confident that their superior technology and overwhelming force would guarantee victory, were starting to falter. The cyberattacks grew more sophisticated, spreading across the alien networks and causing widespread disruptions. The Vaulter, still believing that these setbacks were mere glitches, had no idea they were under a full-scale digital siege. The damage was accumulating quickly, and their once synchronized fleet now found itself bogged down by constant interference. It wasn't just cyber warfare that turned the tide. It was the humans' ability to improvise with limited resources. The Vaulter's advanced energy shields, which had previously made direct attacks impossible, became a key vulnerability when humans developed a series of experimental weapons designed to penetrate their defenses. It was a risky move, relying on untested tech, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The first real success came when a small team of soldiers armed with newly designed energy disruptors managed to breach the Vaulter's shielded perimeter around one of their main bases in Eastern Europe. The Vaulter had been expecting the humans to send waves of poorly coordinated soldiers to their deaths. Instead, they encountered a highly organized, precision strike force that tore through their defenses with the help of the new weaponry. The shock was palpable, and the alien forces began to realize that humanity wasn't as helpless as they'd initially believed. The attack wasn't flawless. The humans lost several soldiers, and the Vaulter quickly retaliated with overwhelming force. But it proved something to both sides. The Vaulter were not invincible, and the humans could land blows where it mattered most. The battle was not one of technology or raw power alone. It was one of strategy and willpower. Zorvek, who had been growing increasingly frustrated with the series of setbacks, finally ordered his forces to engage more directly with the human resistance on Earth. The tide of battle was shifting as humanity's counteroffensive gained momentum for the first time since the invasion began. There was a glimmer of hope. But Zorvek's miscalculation lay in his complete dismissal of human adaptability. He had underestimated the sheer will of a species fighting for survival. What had started as a desperate, disorganized fight was evolving into a coordinated, relentless campaign that the Vaulter had no answer for. Human soldiers and civilians alike had found their rhythm, moving with surprising cohesion as they struck swiftly and without warning. The first major counterattack came when a group of human commandos infiltrated a Vaulter supply depot in South America. They planted explosives that obliterated the alien base's power generators, sending the entire facility into chaos as the Vaulter scrambled to regain control. Another human strike team sabotaged their fleet's communication systems, cutting off Zorvak's ability to coordinate his forces effectively. The chain reaction of sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and relentless pursuit had begun to destabilize the Vaulter occupation. Zorvak, seeing his forces stretched thin and his resources dwindling, ordered reinforcements from the rear, but the humans were already one step ahead. The ambushes were getting deadlier, the attacks more frequent, and the aliens found themselves fighting not just a military force, but a people that had been pushed to the brink and refused to bow. The humans had begun to show their true potential, a relentless force of nature, unified not by technology, but by the unyielding desire to survive and protect their home. And as the Vaulter began to feel the pressure mount, Zorvak had to confront the terrifying reality. The humans were not simply a species to be crushed. They were a species that fought back, and they were starting to win. Zorvak stood on the bridge of the Vaultaurus, his mind racing as reports flooded in of continued sabotage, unexpected human victories, and the mounting chaos across Earth's occupied territories. His confidence, once unshakable, had begun to crack. The humans had shown far more resilience than he had anticipated. His fleet had lost ships, vital resources, and crucial strategic positions, and now he was faced with a terrifying realization. The Vaulter were not invincible after all. Despite the setback, Zorvak's arrogance persisted. He believed that the sheer scale of his forces would eventually crush the human resistance, but the growing number of disruptions made him doubt his earlier assumptions. The humans had done more than slow the invasion. They were systematically unraveling it. As he surveyed his war room, he made a decision that would push his forces into a final push to end the conflict once and for all. On Earth, General Stone knew that the aliens' retreat would only last for so long, and the time had come for humanity's final stand. The resistance forces, emboldened by their successes, prepared for a bold counteroffensive. This was not going to be another hit-and-run mission. It would be an all-out assault on the Vaulter's core operations. Earth's military leaders gathered, a plan being formulated not just for defense, but for the full-scale liberation of Earth's cities. Stone understood that now was the moment to strike back with everything humanity had. Every major resistance cell would combine forces, and they would target the heart of the Vaulter fleet, their central command ship, the Vaultaurus itself. If they could cripple Zorvak's ability to coordinate his forces, the alien empire would be forced to retreat. This was a risky move. If the Vaultaurus was well defended, humanity's chance of success would be slim, but if it worked, it could change the course of the war in a single decisive blow. The plan was set into motion, and within hours, human forces launched a synchronized assault on the Vaulter's most critical targets. They attacked with overwhelming force, using everything from homemade explosives to newly developed weapons taken from alien tech. The Vaulter, caught off guard by the sheer scale and audacity of the operation, struggled to reorganize. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of their world. The first phase of the assault was a devastating surprise attack against a major Vaulter base in Europe. Human commandos infiltrated key positions, sabotaging weapons and energy sources, while fighter jets launched a series of precision strikes on the Vaulter's most vulnerable points. What followed was chaos. Both sides were locked in brutal, close-quarters combat, but humanity's tenacity and unpredictability kept the Vaulter off balance. Zorvak quickly realized that the tide was shifting, but it was too late to reverse the momentum. The Vaulter commander dispatched reinforcements, but each new wave seemed to hit walls of human resistance. each one more inventive and relentless than the last. There were no lines of battle, no conventional military tactics, just humanity's willpower to push forward. Regardless of the odds, the humans had found a rhythm, disrupting supply lines, hitting Vaulter communications, and using every scrap of technology to their advantage. As the Vaulter command structure began to disintegrate under the weight of this continuous assault, Zorvik gave the order for the Vaulterists to engage the human forces directly. He believed that if he could crush the main resistance force in the field, he would regain control over Earth's strategic positions, but his strategy overlooked the greatest advantage humanity had: their ability to keep fighting even when everything seemed lost. Human forces, bolstered by the successes of their sabotage, now pressed harder than ever. Zorvik's fleet was running out of options and time. Each hour the Vaulters spent fighting against the unexpected human resistance was one they couldn't afford as their resources and morale dwindled. The Vaulter commander was beginning to feel the weight of his own miscalculations. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was the beginning of an insurgency that could bring his entire fleet to its knees. If he couldn't control the situation soon, he might lose not only Earth, but the entire sector. And that thought was one that terrified him more than any weapon or army could. The humans were starting to win, and Zorvik realized, for the first time, how dangerously wrong he had been to underestimate them. Zorvik paced back and forth on the Vaulters, his mind churning with frustration and disbelief. The battle for Earth was slipping further from his grasp. The humans had managed to do the unthinkable. They had not only withstood the might of the Vaulter Empire, but they were now on the verge of dismantling the entire occupation. Zorvik's arrogance, once so absolute, was now a sinking weight around his neck. The Vaulter fleet was reeling, their communication systems compromised, supply chains shattered, and their advanced weaponry malfunctioning with increasing frequency. Back on Earth, General Stone could feel the shift in the air. His forces, working in tight coordination, had begun to target the aliens' most important assets with precision and efficiency. They were no longer simply responding to the Vaulters' aggression. They were driving the war to the aliens' doorstep. With every successful mission, the resistance grew more confident, and the fear that had once gripped humanity was now being replaced with determination and unity. Stone's plan had evolved from simple survival to complete liberation. The time for passive resistance was over. The humans were taking the fight directly to the Vaulters' heart, and they were doing it on their own terms. One of the most crucial developments in the human counteroffensive had been the creation of a specialized task force composed of Earth's finest soldiers, engineers, and scientists who had worked tirelessly to reverse engineer captured alien tech. They had developed a new type of weapon, a hybrid of Vaulter technology and human innovation designed to exploit the weaknesses they had discovered in the Vaulters' energy shields. This new weapon would give humanity a fighting chance against the Vaulters' most devastating forces. For the first time, the Vaulters' energy shields, once impervious to any human attack, began to fail under the strain of these new technologies. The human counterattacks became more daring, more effective, and the Vaulter began to lose ground, retreating to defend their most vital strongholds. But Zorvik refused to acknowledge defeat. He doubled down on his belief that Earth's resistance was just a series of isolated skirmishes, temporary setbacks that could be wiped out with enough force. But as more reports of coordinated human attacks flooded in, Zorvik's confidence began to erode. His elite shock troops, once feared throughout the galaxy, were no longer invulnerable, and the human forces were finding their weaknesses, attacking their supply lines, disrupting their command structure, and infiltrating their ranks. Desperate, Zorvik ordered his forces to rally for a final, overwhelming push to crush the human resistance once and for all. He believed that a massive direct assault on Earth's last major fortified city would break the spirit of the humans. Once the city fell, he calculated, the remaining pockets of resistance would crumble. However, this was exactly what Stone had been waiting for. The general had predicted Zorvik's move and had set a trap of his own. Earth's final defense, a city designed to withstand the Vaulters' might, was not the true target. It was the lure to draw the alien forces into a fatal mistake. Stone's forces, having studied every aspect of the Vaulters' tactics and technology, were ready to use their own advantages against the invaders. A synchronized ambush was set in motion. As Zorvek's forces descended on the city, they were met with a barrage of weapons, traps, and sabotage, all designed to cripple the Vaulters' ability to fight back. Even more critical, a coordinated strike team launched a surprise attack on the Vaulters' central command ship, the Vaulterus itself. Using the alien technology they had reversed and combined with their own, they managed to infiltrate the ship's security systems and plant a virus that shut down the ship's primary functions. With the Vaulterus crippled and unable to issue commands, Zorvek's forces were thrown into disarray. The humans, seizing the opportunity, pushed forward with a renewed sense of purpose and aggression. The battle that ensued was one of the fiercest yet, but humanity's unrelenting spirit was finally wearing down the Vaulter. The aliens, despite their superior technology, were now being overwhelmed by the sheer willpower of the human resistance. As the tide turned in humanity's favor, Zorvek could no longer ignore the truth. The Vaulter's grip on Earth was slipping, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Zorvek's desperation reached its peak as his forces faltered under the relentless onslaught of the human resistance. The Vaulterus, his flagship, the symbol of the Vaulter Empire's might, was in chaos. Its once impenetrable systems were crumbling, and he was losing control with every passing moment. Communication lines were down, command structures fractured, and his fleet was scattered across Earth's orbit, unable to regroup or coordinate effectively. The final blow came when a small elite squad of human soldiers infiltrated the heart of the Vaulterus and disabled the ship's central reactor. With the reactor compromised, the once mighty warship began to lose power, its shields flickering and its weapon systems failing. The Vaulterus was no longer a symbol of dominance. It was a dying vessel, stranded in the depths of space as the humans moved in for the kill. Zorvek, still aboard the flagship, felt the weight of his failure. He had underestimated the humans at every turn, dismissing their resourcefulness and resilience as nothing more than fleeting resistance. Now, as his empire began to crumble around him, he understood the gravity of his mistake. His once proud fleet was falling apart, and the world he had planned to claim as part of the Vaulter's vast dominion was slipping out of his grasp. Back on Earth, General Stone watched the tides of battle shift in his favor. The coordinated attacks, the sabotage, and the guerrilla tactics had all converged to break the back of the Vaulter occupation. As news of the Vaulterus's critical damage reached the human commanders, the morale of Earth's fighters soared. They were no longer simply surviving. They were winning, and they could feel it in their bones. Stone knew that victory was within reach, but he also knew that the final battle would be the hardest. It was time for the last push. The human forces, now more unified than ever, launched a full-scale assault on the remaining Vaulter strongholds scattered across the globe. They hit every major command center, energy facility, and military base, each attack carefully planned and executed with precision. The humans were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of their planet, and nothing was going to stop them. Zorvek, realizing his situation was becoming increasingly untenable, made one final desperate decision. He ordered a counterattack, throwing everything he had left into a final attempt to crush the humans once and for all. But the Vaulter forces were too scattered, too disorganized, and too worn down to mount any meaningful resistance. The human forces, now bolstered by their success and determination, fought with an intensity that was unmatched. The Vaulter found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered at every turn. As the final battle raged on, Stone's forces closed in on Zorvek's position. The time for diplomacy, negotiation, and surrender had passed. The humans were no longer interested in mercy. They wanted the Vaulter gone from their world, and they were going to make sure it happened. Zorvek's personal guards fought to protect their commander, but they were no match for the sheer ferocity of the human assault. They were no longer an occupying force. They were invaders on the run, and as Zorvek faced the truth of his inevitable defeat, he realized just how deeply his arrogance had cost him. The battle drew to a close as Stone's forces breached the Volturus itself. Cutting through the alien ship's corridors with precision and ruthlessness, Zorvek, realizing he had no escape, found himself cornered, the walls of his own empire closing in around him. His final thought before he was taken into custody was one of bitter disbelief. He had been wrong about humanity in every way. They were not weak, they were not primitive, they were a force to be reckoned with. And now, they had proven it to the universe. With Zorvek captured and the Volturus neutralized, humanity stood victorious on the world they had once thought would fall, but the cost had been high, and the scars of the invasion would remain long after the last Voltur warship had been driven from Earth. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to survive, and what it meant to fight back. The Voltur Empire had underestimated them, and in doing so had sealed their own defeat. And so, the Earth that had once seemed so fragile and defenseless stood resolute, a testament to the power of humanity's will to endure. The victory was hard-won, and the world was forever changed as Zorvek's forces scattered, retreating in disarray back to their home systems. Earth's people looked around at the devastation that had been wrought during the long months of occupation. Cities lay in ruin, infrastructure shattered, and lives lost in the fight for survival. But amid the destruction, there was also a profound sense of triumph, a sense that humanity, once underestimated and thought weak, had become something far greater than the invaders could ever have imagined. General Stone stood at the head of the military council, his face tired but resolute. His mind raced with the implications of their victory. The war was over, but the struggle was far from finished. Rebuilding would take years, and the scars left by the alien invasion would last even longer. But Stone knew that Earth's greatest asset, the thing that had carried them through the darkness, was the very thing the Voltur had failed to understand: their unyielding will to survive. The human resistance, once disorganized and ragtag, had evolved into a force of unparalleled resolve. They had adapted to the challenges they faced, learned from their mistakes, and turned their resourcefulness into their greatest weapon. Now, with the Voltur retreating, the leaders of Earth began the monumental task of healing and rebuilding what had been lost. And as they did, they knew one thing with certainty: the Earth would never again be a target of anyone who sought to conquer it. In the weeks following Zorvek's capture, the human leaders convened with representatives from the global resistance, and the newly reformed military command. Stone was hailed as a hero, but he deflected all praise, instead focusing on the enormity of the task ahead. There was no time for celebration. Not yet. The fight to reclaim their world had been won. But now humanity would have to prove that they could rise from the ashes and rebuild stronger than before. As the reconstruction efforts began, something extraordinary started to happen. The nations of Earth, which had been fractured before the invasion, now found common ground in the shared experience of victory in the face of annihilation. The people of Earth had united in a way that no one had ever thought possible. Governments put aside old grudges, and old alliances were forged as the survivors of the war moved forward together, determined to ensure that no such invasion could ever happen again. In the wake of the Voltur's retreat, humanity's technological development surged. Humans had managed to reverse engineer parts of the Voltur's advanced tech, and though they had lost many of their most brilliant minds to the war, those that remained began pushing the boundaries of what they thought possible. New energy sources were discovered, new propulsion technologies created, and the most significant achievement, Earth's first interstellar fleet, was in the planning stages. The world had been forever altered, but so too had humanity. For the first time, the galaxy knew that Earth was no longer a vulnerable backwater planet waiting to be conquered. Now, it was a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy would soon learn that humanity, when pushed to the brink, could not only survive. They could rise, adapt, and thrive. Zorvek's final moments on Earth were spent in captivity, his arrogance broken and his empire shattered. The once proud commander of the Voltur Empire had become nothing more than a symbol of the catastrophic consequences of underestimating humanity, as he languished in a human prison. Zorvek could only watch as the world he sought to dominate flourished in ways he had never believed possible. As Earth's new era began, the message was clear. The universe had learned a valuable lesson. The age of Earth as a helpless world had ended, and in its place, a new force had emerged. A force born not of technology, but of an indomitable will that no alien empire would dare challenge again. Humanity had won the war, and now they would define their future on their own terms.